It's 3 a.m. The room is quiet, but their mind isn't. The ceiling feels closer than usual. The phone screen lights up their face in the dark. They told everyone they needed space. They convinced themselves distance was strength. They said silence was peace. But tonight, your silence feels different. It doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like something slipping through their fingers. They shift in bed. Open one app. Close it. Open your chat. Scroll up. Scroll down. No new messages. No emotional reaction from you. No late night paragraphs asking for clarity. No, I miss you. No emotional pull. Just nothing. And that nothing, it's louder than anything you ever said. This is the part no one talks about. Avoidants don't fall apart during the argument. They don't crumble when they walk away. They don't even feel the impact the day after. It hits later. It hits when the world goes quiet. It hits when distraction sleeps. It hits at 3 a.m. They grab their phone and open the browser. The first thing they type is simple, almost casual, almost harmless. Why hasn't she texted me yet? They stare at the search results like the internet might soothe their ego, because deep down they were sure you would reach out. You always did. After every cold withdrawal, after every confusing mixed signal, after every time they pulled back and called it space, you chased, you clarified, you fought for connection. But now you're silent. And that silence doesn't feel like a tactic, it feels like absence. They replay the last conversation, the last tone in your voice, the last message you sent. Was there something final in it? Something tired? Something different? They scroll through your social media. You're active, you're posting, you're living. You're not spiraling publicly. You're not sending emotional signals into the void. That's what unsettles them. Because when someone truly detaches, they don't announce it, they just disappear emotionally. They expected pursuit. Instead, they got peace. So they search again. Do avoidants miss their ex? And they hesitate before pressing enter, almost like they're exposing themselves. They don't even like the word miss. It sounds needy. It sounds dependent. So they tell themselves they're just curious, just researching, just understanding psychology. But what they're really asking is, why does this feel heavier than I expected? The answers online talk about suppressed emotions, delayed processing, emotional distancing as a defense mechanism. They read about how avoidants often feel relief first and grief later. That relief comes from escaping emotional intensity. That grief creeps in when they realize what they actually lost. They swallow, because that timeline feels familiar. At first, it felt lighter without the emotional depth, no expectations, no vulnerability, no pressure to show up emotionally, just space, calm, control. But now the calm feels empty. Now they notice small things, the way you used to check in, the way you understood their moods without them explaining, the way you stayed patient when they shut down. They didn't call it safety before, they called it convenience, they called it comfort, they called it not that serious. But at 3 a.m., honesty hits differently. They search again. Signs she's moved on for good. This one isn't curiosity, this one is fear. Because if you've moved on, that means this isn't temporary. That means your silence isn't a strategy. That means you're not waiting. That means they miscalculated. They look for signs. Is she posting less about love? Is she glowing differently? Is she too calm? They analyze your captions like hidden messages. They check if you're following someone new, if someone new is liking your pictures, if there's a shift in your energy. Your peace feels threatening because your peace means you're not in pain. And if you're not in pain, maybe you're done. They toss the phone aside, then grab it again. They tell themselves they don't care, but they wouldn't be searching if they didn't. This is where the power dynamic shifts silently. They thought your silence was a game. They thought you were trying to provoke them. They thought you'd break first. They thought time would soften you, not strengthen you. But time is doing something unexpected. It's making you quieter. And your quiet isn't emotional anymore. It's steady. They search again. How long does no contact last? They don't even like admitting that phrase. No contact sounds strategic. It sounds intentional. It sounds like you're doing something on purpose. They scroll through forums and threads. People saying 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Some saying forever, forever. That word hits differently in the dark. Because forever means they don't get another chance to feel your warmth. Forever means the door isn't cracked open. Forever means they misjudged your threshold. They always believed you'd tolerate more, forgive more, wait longer, but maybe they reached the edge. They think about texting you, just something small, casual, neutral, But pride wraps around their fingers. Pride whispers, if they wanted to, they would. Pride says, don't look weak. Pride says, they're probably waiting for you to cave. But doubt interrupts pride tonight. What if you're not waiting? They open the browser one more time. What happens when you ignore an avoidant? Now it's personal. Now, it's not about you moving on. It's about them losing control. The answers sting. They read that when avoidants are ignored, it disrupts their emotional safety, that they expect distance to be their choice, not yours. That when someone mirrors their detachment, it creates anxiety. That silence removes their sense of control. Control. That's the word that sits heavy. They didn't realize how much control comforted them. They controlled the pace, the depth, the vulnerability, the closeness. They pulled back when things felt intense. They leaned in when they wanted reassurance. The dynamic worked because you responded, but now you're not responding. And suddenly they're the one refreshing their screen. Suddenly they're the one wondering. Suddenly they're the one feeling that subtle panic in their chest. It's unfamiliar. It feels almost anxious. They don't like it. They want to label it something else. Boredom, ego bruising, curiosity, anything but attachment. But the body doesn't lie at 3 a.m. Their chest feels tight, their thoughts loop, their sleep is shallow. They miss the certainty that you cared loudly. Your silence forces them to sit with something they avoided, vulnerability without control. Because when you were chasing, they felt powerful. When you were explaining, they felt secure. When you were emotional, they felt needed. But now, your silence is self-contained, and self-contained love is the one thing they don't know how to navigate. They wonder if you're finally choosing yourself. They wonder if someone else is making you laugh. They wonder if you're healing in ways they never expected. And beneath all of that wondering is something softer. Regret. Not dramatic regret, not loud confession regret, quiet regret. The kind that whispers, maybe I should have handled that differently. The kind that asks, was I too cold? The kind that replays your last vulnerable moment and sees it from a new angle. At 3 a.m., their pride sleeps. And in that silence, they finally feel the weight of yours. They don't text. Not yet. Morning will come. Walls will rise again. Logic will return. They'll convince themselves it's fine, that you'll reach out eventually, that this is temporary. But tonight, in the dark, with no audience and no ego performance, they're searching for reassurance, searching for answers, searching for proof that they haven't lost you. And the most ironic part, the very silence they once used to protect themselves is now the thing that's unraveling them. You're not arguing, you're not begging, you're not explaining. You're just gone. And at 3 a.m., that's the loudest thing in the world. And the room is still dark. The glow of the phone fades for a moment as they lock the screen, but their thoughts don't power down so easily. The silence between you is no longer peaceful, it's heavy. It presses against their chest in ways they don't know how to name. They turn onto their side, then back again. And eventually, almost reluctantly, they unlock the phone once more. This time the search feels more personal. Less about you, more about what's happening inside them. Why do I feel anxious when someone pulls away? They stare at the words after typing them, almost surprised at themselves. Anxious? That's not a word they usually associate with who they are. They've always been the calm one, the composed one, the one who doesn't overreact, the one who needs space when things get intense. But now their heart is beating faster than it should. Now they're the one refreshing screens. Now they're the one wondering what you're thinking. The articles talk about attachment triggers, about how distance can activate fear of abandonment even in those who claim they don't need anyone, about how control creates safety, and when control disappears, panic creeps in. They swallow. Because this doesn't feel like boredom. It feels like losing something they assumed would always be there. And that realization unsettles them more than they expected. They always believed that if things ended, they'd be fine. They've walked away before. They've shut down before. They've convinced themselves they don't get attached in the same way others do. But this feels different. This feels like the roles have reversed. You're not reacting. You're not protesting. You're not fighting to pull them closer. You're just still, and that stillness is activating something they can't easily dismiss. They close the browser again, then open it. Because pride may be loud during the day, but at 3 a.m., curiosity wins. They type something that almost feels like a confession. What happens when you lose control in a relationship? They don't even fully understand why they're searching that, but deep down, they know. The one thing they never expected was to feel replaceable. They expected you to need them more than they needed you. They expected that if they withdrew, you'd lean in harder. They expected the dynamic to stay predictable, but your silence has shifted the balance, and suddenly they're the one unsure, the one unsettled, the one questioning. The idea that you might not be waiting quietly anymore starts to form. It's subtle at first, just a thought, but once it's there, it grows. What if she's not coming back? That thought echoes louder than any argument ever did. They sit up slightly in bed, their chest tightens. They replay your patience, the times you tried to communicate, the times you asked for reassurance, the moments you expressed hurt, and they responded with distance. Back then, they told themselves you were too emotional, too demanding, too sensitive. Now they're wondering if you were simply asking for consistency. And the more they think about it, the more uncomfortable it becomes. Because losing control means losing the illusion that you'll always be there. They type again. Will she come back if I wait? There it is. Hope disguised as strategy. They scroll through answers that contradict each other. Some say yes, silence creates longing. Others say no, silence creates closure. Some say if she loved you, she'll return. Others say if she respects herself, she won't. The uncertainty eats at them. They don't want to text first. That feels like surrender. But waiting feels like risk. And for someone who built safety around control, risk feels unbearable. They glance at your profile again. No emotional posts. No cryptic messages. No visible pain. Just calm. And calm is dangerous. Because calm suggests acceptance. They start to realize something slowly, painfully. You're not trying to manipulate them. You might actually be moving forward. That thought makes their stomach drop. For the first time, they imagine you laughing with someone else, sharing parts of yourself with someone who doesn't flinch at vulnerability, someone who doesn't disappear when things feel deep. Jealousy creeps in quietly, not explosive jealousy, quiet jealousy. The kind that makes them compare themselves to hypothetical replacements, the kind that makes them wonder if someone else will appreciate what they took for granted. They search again, almost defensively. Did I push her away? It's typed slowly this time, each word heavier than the last. They read stories from others who withdrew too much, who assumed their partner would tolerate the distance, who mistook patience for permanence. And something shifts, because deep down they know there were moments they could have responded differently. Moments they could have softened instead of shut down. Moments they felt the urge to reassure you, but chose silence instead. They justified it then, told themselves emotions would settle, told themselves you'd understand. But what if understanding has limits? What if love without reciprocity eventually dries up? They lean back against the headboard, staring at nothing. The room feels quieter than before. And the quiet is no longer peaceful. It's reflective. They think about the last time you reached out vulnerably, the last time you asked if everything was okay, the last time you tried to bridge the distance. They remember feeling overwhelmed. Now they wonder if that overwhelm was fear. Fear of being needed. Fear of not knowing how to show up. Fear of intimacy, demanding more than they felt capable of giving. And now that you're gone, that fear feels small compared to the fear of losing you permanently. They run a hand over their face. Sleep isn't coming anytime soon. Their pride tries to speak up again. If she wanted to talk, she would. But pride doesn't feel convincing anymore. Because if you wanted to chase, you would have, and you're not. They unlock the phone one more time. Why does it hurt when I was the one who left? This one hits differently. Because they did create the distance. They did ask for space. They did emotionally withdraw first. So why does it feel like they're the one being left behind? The answers talk about delayed grief, about emotional suppression, about how some people don't process loss until it becomes real. And your silence has made it real. When you were still reaching out, it didn't feel final. When you were still reacting, it felt reversible. But now it feels like a door slowly closing, and they're standing on the wrong side of it. They start to realize that the relief they felt in the beginning wasn't freedom. It was avoidance. Avoidance of hard conversations. Avoidance of vulnerability. Avoidance of accountability. But silence removes distractions. And at 3 a.m., there's nothing left to avoid. Just thoughts. Just memories. Just the growing awareness that they might have underestimated your strength. They thought you'd always be emotionally available. They didn't consider the possibility that one day you'd choose yourself over them. And that possibility is the one thing they never prepared for. They stare at your name in their phone. Their thumb hovers over the chat. They imagine typing something simple. Hey, casual, neutral, safe. But what if you don't respond? That fear stops them. Because being ignored would confirm the one thing they don't want to face. That you're done. So instead, they sit there, caught between pride and longing, between ego and vulnerability, between reaching out and risking rejection. They didn't expect silence to feel like this. They didn't expect to be the one questioning. They didn't expect to feel anxious. But here they are, at 3 a.m., missing the sound of your notifications, missing the certainty of your presence, missing the version of you that waited, and slowly realizing that version might not exist anymore. The night stretches on. They tell themselves they'll think about it tomorrow. They tell themselves they'll stay strong. They tell themselves it's not that serious. But deep down, something undeniable has shifted. Your silence has done what arguments never could. It forced them to feel, and feeling is the one thing they've spent years learning how to escape. The clock now reads 3:47 a.m. The night feels endless. Their thoughts are no longer just curious. They're uncomfortable, sharp, honest in a way daylight never allows. They sit there with their phone resting against their chest, staring into the dark, replaying moments they once dismissed. Your laugh when you felt safe. Your silence when you felt hurt. The way your energy shifted slowly toward the end. They didn't notice it then. Or maybe they did and chose not to look too closely. Because looking closely would have required accountability. And accountability feels like exposure. They unlock the phone again. Not to check your page this time. To search something they've never dared to say out loud. Why do I sabotage good relationships? The words feel heavier than anything they've typed tonight. Sabotage. That implies responsibility. That implies a pattern. They scroll slowly, reading about emotional avoidance, about pushing people away before they get too close, about creating distance when intimacy feels overwhelming, about mistaking safety for boredom, and chaos for passion. Their jaw tightens, because some of it feels painfully familiar. They remember moments where things were good, calm, stable. You weren't asking for too much. You weren't demanding perfection. You just wanted presence. And somehow that steadiness made them restless. So they pulled back, picked small fights, got distant, stopped responding as quickly, acted colder than they felt. Not because they didn't care, but because caring deeply made them feel exposed. And exposure feels dangerous to someone who learned early that vulnerability isn't always safe. But now, sitting alone in the dark, they realize something slowly. You weren't the threat. Intimacy was. They close their eyes and remember the last time you tried to talk about the future. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't intense, it was hopeful. And instead of leaning in, they changed the subject. Instead of reassuring you, they minimized it. Instead of meeting your vulnerability, they retreated. At the time, it felt like self-protection. Now it feels like self-sabotage. Their chest feels heavier. Not with panic this time, with regret. Quiet regret. The kind that doesn't scream, the kind that sits. They type again. Can avoidance change? There's hesitation before hitting enter. Because asking that question means acknowledging there's something to change. The articles talk about awareness being the first step, about how avoidance is often rooted in early experiences, about how growth requires discomfort, about how patterns don't shift without intention. They skim through words like therapy, healing, emotional regulation, vulnerability work. It sounds overwhelming. It sounds like effort. It sounds like stepping into the very feelings they've been avoiding. And for a moment, they feel defensive. I'm not that bad. It wasn't all my fault. She was sensitive too. The mind looks for balance, for justification. But then they remember your face the last time you felt unseen. They remember the exhaustion in your voice. They remember how you stopped arguing toward the end. And that memory hurts more than any accusation. Because when someone stops fighting, it usually means they're done trying. They set the phone down on their chest and stare at the ceiling. The thought creeps in slowly. What if she really is happier without me? That thought lingers, uncomfortable, heavy. They pick the phone back up. Is she happier without me? They don't know what they expect the internet to say, but they read about how people glow differently when they leave situations that drain them, how peace can look like indifference from the outside, how silence can mean healing. Healing. The idea that you might be healing from them hits deeper than they expected. They never saw themselves as harmful. Distant maybe. Independent. Yes. But harmful? They replay small moments. The unread messages. The canceled plans. The times you opened up and they responded with logic instead of comfort. The way they disappear emotionally when things got too intense. None of it felt cruel in the moment. It felt necessary. Now they wonder how it felt from your side. They imagine you slowly learning to stop expecting warmth from someone who couldn't consistently give it. They imagine you deciding to protect your own heart. And for the first time tonight, they feel something close to shame. Not because you accuse them, but because your silence feels like proof. Proof that you reached your limit. They roll onto their side and open your chat again. The last message you sent wasn't angry. It wasn't desperate. It was calm. That calmness is what scares them now. Because calmness doesn't beg. Calmness doesn't chase. Calmness walks away quietly. Their thumb hovers over the keyboard again. They type a message, delete it. Type again, delete again. Every version feels wrong. Too casual feels dismissive. Too emotional feels vulnerable. Too long feels desperate. They search again. How to text her without looking desperate. There it is. The balance they're trying to maintain. They don't want to lose you. But they don't want to lose pride either. They read suggestions about keeping it light, about checking in, about pretending nothing happened. But deep down, they know light won't fix this. Light won't undo months of emotional distance. Light won't rebuild trust. Light won't convince someone who finally found peace to step back into uncertainty. They put the phone down again. Their heart feels tired. Because this isn't just about sending a text. It's about facing themselves, facing the pattern, facing the reality that silence for once isn't theirs. It's yours. And your silence feels intentional, not manipulative, not dramatic. Intentional. They think about how many times you probably lay awake questioning yourself, wondering if you were too much, wondering if you should ask for less, wondering if love was supposed to feel this one-sided. And they realize something slowly. You were strong longer than they gave you credit for. Your silence isn't weakness. It's self-respect. That realization shifts something inside them. Because if you're choosing yourself now, it means you finally stopped waiting for them to choose you. And that thought hurts in a way they didn't expect. They don't want to admit it, but they miss being needed. They miss knowing you cared deeply. They miss the reassurance that no matter how distant they became, you were still there. And now they're not sure you are. The clock reads 4:32 a.m. Sleep feels impossible. The night feels like a mirror. And in that mirror, they're starting to see parts of themselves they've avoided for years. They wonder if they'll actually change. Or if when morning comes, they'll convince themselves this was just loneliness talking. They wonder if reaching out will fix anything, or if you've already emotionally closed the door. They sit with one final thought before the next search. If I lose her because of my own fear, will I ever forgive myself? And that question stays with them. Heavy, unanswered, real. The room is silent, but inside something is shifting in a way they can't undo. The defensiveness that protected them for so long feels thinner now. The justifications don't hit the same. The story they used to tell themselves, that space equals strength, that detachment equals control, is starting to crack. They unlock the phone again. Not to search this time, to sit in the truth. But habit pulls them back into the browser anyway. Why do I miss someone I pushed away? There's something painfully honest about that sentence. It doesn't blame you. It doesn't twist the narrative. It doesn't pretend this is mutual confusion. It admits something simple. They pushed, and now they feel the absence. They read about emotional delay, about how some people don't process connection until it's no longer accessible, about how the nervous system only relaxes enough to feel once the threat of intimacy is gone. And that's when it hits them. It was never that they didn't care. It was that caring felt overwhelming. When you were close, their system felt pressure. When you were distant, their system feels loss. They sit with that contradiction because it means the problem was never your love. It was their capacity to receive it. They think about the way you used to look at them, not with obsession, not with neediness, but with depth. You saw them, even the parts they tried to hide, even the parts they pretended didn't exist. And instead of leaning into that safety, they questioned it. They doubted it. They tested it. Because being truly seen can feel terrifying to someone who learned early that being seen leads to disappointment. But now you're gone. And suddenly being unseen feels worse. They type again. Do avoidants regret losing someone? There's almost desperation in that search. They don't want to be the villain in their own story. They don't want to accept that they might look back on this years from now and realize they let something real slip away because they were afraid. The answers don't comfort them. Some say yes, deeply, but quietly. Some say regret comes too late. Some say growth only happens when loss is undeniable. Loss. That word settles into their chest because your silence now feels like loss. not temporary distance, not tension, not a phase, loss. They think about what you represented: stability, patience, emotional depth, someone who chose them consistently. And now, without your reassurance, they're forced to sit with something they never wanted to admit. They needed you more than they allowed themselves to believe. They search again. What if she never comes back? The question is no longer hypothetical. It's real. They imagine life moving forward without your name lighting up their phone, without your voice softening their hard days, without someone who understood their moods even when they couldn't explain them. They imagine you building something healthier with someone else. And jealousy is no longer subtle. It's sharp, not because they think you belong to them, but because they're realizing they didn't show up the way you deserved, and someone else might. That realization hurts more than pride ever could. The clock reads 4:58 a.m. Morning is close, and with morning comes the return of their mask. They know this. They know that once the sun rises, they'll start minimizing this, telling themselves they were just emotional, just tired, just lonely. But right now, in this fragile space between night and day, they're honest. They don't want to lose you. Not because you boosted their ego, not because you chased, but because your presence felt like home. Even if they didn't know how to live inside that home without feeling restless, they unlock your chat again. This time, they don't immediately type, they scroll up through old messages, old jokes, old plans, memories that once felt guaranteed. They see your effort in the small things now, the way you checked in, the way you tried to understand, the way you communicated clearly, even when they didn't. And something shifts again, because your silence isn't punishment. It's protection. You stopped overextending yourself for someone who couldn't meet you consistently. And they're finally seeing that. They type one last search. Is it too late to fix things? The fear underneath that question is raw, because sometimes silence isn't a tactic. Sometimes it's closure. They read about timing, about accountability, about the difference between reaching out for comfort and reaching out with growth. And that's when it truly lands. If they text you just to soothe their own anxiety, nothing changes. If they reach out without reflection, without responsibility, without willingness to do the uncomfortable work, they'll repeat the same cycle. And maybe you won't give them another chance to repeat it. The sky outside begins to lighten slightly. The night that forced them to feel is almost over. They sit there with one final realization. Your silence didn't destroy them. It revealed them. It revealed the parts of them that crave connection but fear vulnerability. The parts that want love but struggle to stay present in it. The parts that assumed you'd always be there, no matter how distant they became, but you're not there the same way anymore. And that absence is louder than any argument you ever had. They look at your name one last time before locking the phone. Their heart feels different now. Not just anxious, aware. Aware that love isn't proven by how well someone chases you. It's proven by how well you show up when they stop chasing. Aware that silence can be a boundary, not a game. Aware that control is comforting, but connection requires surrender. The sun begins to rise, and with it, the familiar defenses start to rebuild. But something from this night will stay with them. Because at 3 a.m., when pride was asleep and the world was quiet, they faced something real. They faced the possibility of losing someone who loved them deeply. They faced the truth that your silence isn't weakness, it's strength. And whether they choose growth or retreat when the daylight fully arrives, that choice will define what happens next. But one thing is certain, tonight your silence hit. And for the first time, they didn't run from what they felt. They searched, they reflected, they questioned, they felt. And sometimes that's where change begins.